Picture this: Prague, year 1682. The city sleeps under a sky shrouded in mist, the moon veiled behind clouds like a secret refusing to be told. The air is heavy, metallic, and sharp, carrying the scent of rain mixed with something older, something forged from desperation and faith. Down an alley narrow enough for shadows to touch across the stones, there is a door. You are not meant to find it. And yet, tonight, you do. You push it open, and the hinges cry softly, as if remembering. Inside, a staircase spirals downward, carved from cold earth, slick with condensation. The descent feels endless. Each step takes you deeper into a world that forgot sunlight centuries ago. At the bottom, flickers of candlelight reveal a circle of figures draped in worn robes, hoods concealing faces pale from sleepless nights. They do not speak, but you can feel the hum of their breath, synchronized, reverent. They call themselves the Seekers of Continuance, a name rarely written, only whispered among those who believe that mortality is a design flaw to be corrected. The walls around them are etched with sigils that shimmer faintly when the candlelight flickers. Upon a slab of marble lies a basin of quicksilver, reflecting their movements like broken ghosts. In that gleam, they believe truth can be distilled, the essence of eternity itself. To understand these people, you must understand the age that birthed them. Europe trembled between faith and reason, between and sin. The plague had scarred faces and cities alike, reminding all of the fragility of flesh. The church held dominion, but whispers of forbidden knowledge had already escaped its grasp. Men claimed to transmute lead into gold, to summon angels through geometry, to speak with the dead using mirrors and flame. And in the dead of night, some dared to reach for more than wisdom, for immortality. You know the names history allows you to remember: Paracelsus, Flamel, Dee. But between those famed alchemists were hundreds more, nameless scholars, wandering healers, heretics burned before their work could be finished. These were the people who met beneath the alchemist's moon, clutching manuscripts inked in code. Their meeting places were not temples, but cellars. Their hymns were the hiss of boiling glass. Their prayers were the equations scratched into iron. The seeker's origins lie in the ruins of an old apothecary that once served the emperor's court. After a fire consumed it, only the basement survived. There, a forgotten scholar named Gregor Lunkwitz is said to have discovered a half-burned journal containing a single phrase: "The flesh is but the chrysalis of the eternal." Those words became his scripture. Rumor says he gathered followers, men and women cast out by universities and monasteries alike, those obsessed not with wealth, but with the defeat of decay. Lunkwitz believed that the key to life everlasting was hidden not in divine mercy, but in matter itself. The soul, he claimed, was a vessel of energy bound by imperfect flesh. To release and retain it would be to become deathless. He saw no separation between alchemy and theology. He called his pursuit the of the divine. That doctrine lured many who had lost faith in both church and medicine. They came from across borders, fleeing persecution, following faint rumors of a brotherhood that promised unbound time. It is said they met only when the moon vanished, believing darkness freed them from celestial judgment. The ritual began in silence. A mirror would be placed upon the floor, surrounded by vials of mercury, salt, and powdered bone. Above it hung a single candle enclosed in glass, protected from the breath of the living. They would chant the Canticle of Transformation, a sequence of verses said to invoke purity of spirit. Yet, to those who stood outside, the sound was unlike prayer. Some said it resembled weeping. Others claimed it was the whisper of something listening from below. These gatherings were not purely symbolic. With each meeting, their experiments grew more audacious. They sought the philosopher's tears, a supposed compound that could preserve organic matter indefinitely. Witnesses spoke of roses submerged in silver, remaining untouched by time, of fruits that never withered, of small animals that slept for days and woke unharmed. Whether truth or hallucination, the accounts spread among the city's scholars, fueling both awe and dread. In taverns near Charles Bridge, men spoke in hushed tones of a secret order that bought bodies from plague pits under the cover of charity. Others said they drained noble blood for infusion rituals designed to circulate the elixir within human veins. Nothing could be proven, and everything was denied. Still, the words persisted, blooming like mold in silence. The church dispatched inspectors, but none ever located the chamber. Whether through luck or conspiracy, the seekers remained untouched. It is tempting to see them as fools, but their writings reveal something more complex. They knew they were standing at the edge of madness. Between sanctity and sin, one manuscript reads, there lies only the failure of experiment. They documented every failure meticulously, not as confessions, but as offerings. For them, error was sacred, proof that transformation required suffering. What they sought was not merely endless life, but perfection, the purification of humanity from its mortal corruption. When dawn approached, the congregation would disperse, their faces hidden behind masks of brass shaped like celestial symbols. They would melt into the waking city as priests, physicians, and merchants. Outwardly, they lived ordinary lives. But by night, each continued private experimentation, certain that somewhere among their equations awaited the touch of eternity. Some vanished within months, leaving behind rooms filled with glass retorts and stains that no cleaning could remove. Others lived long enough to pen warnings disguised as letters of philosophy, ending with the same phrase, "Remember the mirror." The mirror, always the mirror. It was both an altar and a doorway, a surface that consumed more than reflection. They believed its polished face could reveal the soul's true form. To gaze too long was to risk dissolution, to see one's essence unravel like smoke. Yet they returned to it again and again, drawn by the promise of glimpsing what lies beyond the final breath. In that hunger, the seekers began to blur the boundary between life and its imitation. As the years passed, Prague's scholars noticed strange coincidences. Deaths followed by sightings of the same individuals, pale and silent, walking the streets at impossible hours. Apothecaries reported thefts of mercury and herbs long used in embalming. Some said the city itself began to rot from within, that the very air in its lower quarters grew heavy, as though breathing sorrow. The authorities dismissed such reports as madness born from fear of the unknown. But fear, as history teaches, often hides fragments of truth. Lungwitz himself faded into rumor. The last mention of him appears in a chronicle dated 1703, written by a physician obsessed with transmutation. It speaks of an old man seen wandering the catacombs beneath Visegrad Castle, carrying a lantern dim as dying breath. His eyes, it says, burned like molten glass, and his skin bore no sign of age. No trace of his body was ever found. Some claim he succeeded, others believe he finally became what he feared most, a reflection without a soul. In the centuries that followed, secret societies arose claiming lineage from the seekers of continuance. Most were charlatans, sellers of trick elixirs and false sermons. But occasionally, a name would appear in an archive linking to an impossible birth date, or a physician's ledger signed by hands identical across generations. Patterns that could not be coincidence. The cult symbols, an Ouroboros encircling a mirror, were found carved into old books, walls, and tombs. With each discovery, scholars dismissed the connection as myth. Yet myths, like embers, persist because something once set them alight. To this day, among collectors of forbidden texts, there is talk of a work called the Luminous Corpus. It contains, they say, the final doctrine of the brotherhood, that immortality is not achieved through the body's preservation, but through its deliberate fragmentation, to destroy the vessel and reassemble it purified of decay. This, they claimed, was the last step of the great work. No one who has claimed to see it remains reachable. Letters vanish, homes burn, trails end in silence. The pattern repeats, faithful as gravity. So picture this again, a city swallowed by mist, the echo of steps descending into the ground, the scent of oil and salt in the air. You hear a whisper, not in your ear but beneath your skin, that asks a single question. What price would you pay to outlive death itself? Because to the seekers, the answer was everything. Their pursuit was never madness to them. It was devotion, pure and absolute. They saw mortality as betrayal, a flaw to be corrected. And if eternity required crossing lines unspoken, then so be it. They would walk willingly into darkness, trusting that on the other side waited the light of an everlasting dawn. This is where the legend begins, beneath the alchemist's moon, where ambition becomes faith and faith becomes obsession. In the mirror's cold reflection, they saw not monsters, but deliverance. And though centuries have turned their names to dust, their oath still lingers in the air, whispering one truth across time. Death is patient, but it can be challenged. Picture this, the streets of Paris in the year 1695, lit by lanterns trembling in the wind. The night smells of damp cobblestone and wax, and beneath the hum of distant bells, a man walks with a leather-bound box clutched to his chest. His name will be lost, but his purpose endures, to deliver a secret that kings would kill for. Inside the box rests a vial of silver liquid, said to shimmer not with light, but with something alive. The legend calls it the Elixir of Life, the philosopher's ultimate creation, proof that matter itself could transcend death. In the laboratories of Europe's greatest cities, scholars worked by candlelight until their bones ached, chasing what they called the magnum opus, the great work. They believed that beneath the corruption of metal and flesh slept purity waiting to be freed. To them, decay was not the end, but a symptom to be cured, and the cure was transformation. By the late 17th century, alchemy had become a fever of both mind and heart. Governments forbade its practice, yet nobles secretly funded it. Behind closed doors, whispers turned to contracts. Gold and immortality were spoken of as if both could be purchased. In basements filled with smoke and mercury, the line between experiment and rite vanished entirely. To the initiated was divine language. To outsiders, blasphemy wearing a scholar's robe. Among these alchemists was a man named Etienne du Clermont, a mathematician, monk, and defrocked priest who believed that numbers could sanctify matter. He wrote that, "To perfect metal is to perfect the soul, and his followers took it as gospel. He gathered a small circle within the catacombs beneath Montmartre. There, they combined geometry with prayer, claiming each ritual brought them closer to transcending the human limit. Some called their practice holy, others called it madness disguised as logic. Their methods blended chemistry, mysticism, and symbolism in equal measure. Fire was not just a tool, but an act of purification. Mercury represented the divine spirit. Salt embodied the body. Sulfur, the soul itself. They wrote these formulas in ciphers so intricate that even today, half their meaning dies untranslated. For every failure, a life was shortened. For every success, if one could call it that, something unexplainable emerged. Books record glass vials glowing without heat, metals that breathed mist like lungs, and liquids that refused to cool. One document from Lungwitz's lineage mentions a ritual titled The Promise. It demanded fasting, silence, and the burning of a written confession. The ashes were mixed into a solution of distilled silver, believed to cleanse the spirit through suffering. Those who drank it claimed visions of distant landscapes, voices that spoke without mouths, and warmth bleeding into their bones like dawn. Some survived, others did not. To the cultists, even death was considered a form of progress, a flawed transmutation awaiting perfection. Du Clermont's circle was not alone. Across Europe, similar sects emerged. In the hills of Bohemia, in the libraries of Venice, in the ruins of old abbeys, where monks once prayed for salvation rather than. They traded letters sealed with black wax, each bearing symbols known only to them: stars, mirrors, suns inverted. The tone of their words suggested less of fraternity and more of discipline, as though bound to an oath older than blood. Centuries later, fragments of these letters were discovered in archives alongside coins that did not tarnish and feathers that refused to burn. But every promise requires faith, and faith demands sacrifice. The elixir's pursuit soon began to devour its believers. Simple metals would not yield. Human attempts ended in agony or delirium. Yet, they persisted, certain that one success could justify 1,000 ruinous attempts. That conviction transformed laboratories into sanctuaries of suffering. There were rumors, always rumors, of human blood used as the final reagent, the soul's catalyst. The church banned all experiments under threat of execution. Still, in the quiet hours before dawn, candles continued to burn. One night in Prague, a scholar named Aurelius Felton claimed to complete the transmutation. He invited his patrons to witness it. They describe a flame cold as winter that did not consume but transformed, and a metal that pulsed like a heartbeat. When they dared to touch it, it dissolved into air, leaving only the scent of roses and iron. Felton vanished before sunrise. Some believed he achieved enlightenment. Others whispered that he crossed into a place not meant for the living. As these mysteries deepened, so too did the myth. Common folk spoke of a figure who walked through storms untouched by time, selling phials of liquid light to those desperate for youth. He was known by many names: the Eternal Watcher, the Silver Saint, the Wandering Philosopher. But his face was always the same: pale, calm, ageless. Some claim he was Du Clermont himself, others that he was only what their obsession created, a ghost born from want. The idea of immortality spread beyond laboratories into courts and kingdoms. Monarchs and generals began collecting alchemical texts, not for curiosity, but for power. The promise of the elixir was not only defiance of death, but control over history itself. What ruler would fear rebellion if he could not die? What church could silence a man who outlived time? So secret funds flowed into hidden workshops, and the line between scholar and prisoner blurred. The deeper they delved into eternity, the further they strayed from humanity. All records of these experiments share one frightening consistency: temperature drops, metallic echoes, and an overwhelming presence described as the stillness. Those who stood near the process felt watched, as though the boundary between observer and subject had broken. The alchemists accepted this as proof that they were not alone, that they had, at last, attracted the attention of something eternal. Whether that presence was divine or monstrous, none dared name it aloud. As the 18th century unfolded, the temples of knowledge turned against their own children. Universities outlawed alchemical pursuits, and scholars were forced underground again. Europe moved toward reason, to unchained from mysticism, while shadows like du Clermont's still whispered that reason was only faith wearing another mask. The cult of immortality fractured, dividing into those who sought literal eternal life and those who insisted that the true philosopher's stone was metaphor, a spiritual awakening beyond time. Yet, somewhere between those extremes, the promise lingered. Letters smuggled from Paris to Venice describe the same haunting sequence: a silver circle drawn in salt, a mirror surrounded by 7 symbols, and a single drop of blood placed upon its surface. For those who attempted it, reflection became revelation. They claimed to see not their faces, but a version of themselves unbroken by years, eyes calm and eternal. When the image faded, most collapsed. A few rose changed, speaking little, walking slower, inhaling as if for the first time. To some, these were saints. To others, abominations. The elixir's legends evolved with each claim. Some said it required the philosopher's stone, others that it grew naturally from mercury blessed under lunar light. In truth, it was never one thing. It was hope bottled and weaponized. It was the temptation that every age rediscovers and names anew. Philosophers argued that the elixir was symbolic, a test of man's longing to master death. But those who hunted it did not seek meaning. They sought results. They believed eternity could be captured in a cup. The final known manuscript describing its preparation was recovered from the ruins of a monastery near Krakow. It was drenched, burned, and illegible, except for a single drawing: a heart encircled by fire and chained to a mirror. Beneath it, the inscription: "Our flesh is the crucible, our memory the gold." Historians interpret it as poetry. Alchemists, however, call it instruction. To this day, the formula remains incomplete, and perhaps mercifully so. Yet the myth refuses extinction. In laboratories of modern, echoes of that old ambition still stir. Geneticists whisper of endless cell renewal, of minds preserved beyond flesh. The vocabulary has changed, the symbols replaced by equations, but the hunger is the same. Somewhere deep within human thought lies the conviction that mortality is a puzzle, and puzzles were made to be solved. And still, beneath sterile glass and electric hum, the ancient words endure in spirit, the promise of the elixir. Because eternity is the oldest addiction. Once you taste the idea of forever, ordinary life turns bitter. Those who sought the elixir of life were not monsters. They were mirrors placed before us. They remind us that the border between devotion and obsession is as thin as a breath, and that some promises, once made, never fade with time. Under the alchemist's moon, beneath layers of history and ruin, their dream remains unbroken. The elixir's promise whispers through every age, adapting its mask, seducing new seekers with the same offer: a world without death, a life unending. But as every alchemist learned too late, to master mortality is to redefine humanity itself. And that bargain has never been made without a cost. Picture this: Vienna, year 1744. The first light of dawn barely touches the city's rooftops when a carriage halts before a derelict mansion at the edge of the Danube. Mist rolls through the gardens like restless ghosts, swallowing statues worn smooth by centuries. A man steps out, his coat draped heavy with rain, his face hidden by a hood. In his hand he carries a letter sealed in blue wax, bearing a symbol: a serpent devouring its own tail surrounding the silhouette of a rising sun. The man's name is only spoken once in the record: Matthias Verenne, a physician once employed in the emperor's court. His dismissal came after accusations of forbidden experimentation, but whispers suggest he was invited away rather than banished. Inside the mansion, gathered around a table carved with celestial diagrams, waits a group of 7. They stand when he enters. No words pass, only recognition. This is the rebirth of a brotherhood, the circle of eternal dawn. To comprehend their purpose, one must first understand their fear. Europe in the mid-18th century wore progress like a mask. But beneath the veneer of enlightenment, anxiety festered. Rationalism sought to strip the divine from the world, replacing mystery with mathematics. Yet to those who had tasted the old ways, reason alone seemed hollow. The circle formed in rebellion, not against, but against its forgetfulness. They sought to reconcile the measurable with the mystical. In their creed, eternity was not myth, but the next logical step in evolution. Matthias Verenne, their founder, claimed that the soul was luminous matter, an unseen element that could be studied, refined, and multiplied. He vowed that through disciplined alchemy and ascetic devotion, mankind could reach its divine potential. But the circle demanded more than faith. Each initiate was required to renounce all ties of name, coin, and kin. The ritual of entrance was called the veiling, performed under the first light of dawn, symbolizing the death of their former selves. To the world, they would become shadows. Within the circle, they were eternal. Their headquarters stood beneath the mansion in chambers lined with mirrors and copper plates. The air there always smelled of salt and ozone, as if storm clouds rested within stone. Candles never burned with open flame. They glowed blue, fueled by a strange residue distilled from mercury and phosphorus. The circle's members referred to this substance as lumen vitae, the light of life. Its discovery, they claimed, was the first glimpse of the true philosopher's stone, a living element waiting to awaken consciousness beyond decay. Records found in coded manuscripts describe the group's structure. 7 ranks mirrored the 7 stages of alchemical transmutation: calcination, dissolution, separation, conjunction, fermentation, distillation, coagulation. Each rank required both intellectual and spiritual mastery, facing symbolic trials that tested endurance and faith. Advancement was celebrated not with feasts, but with silence, as if any outpouring of joy risked summoning death's attention. Outsiders whispered that the circle's members glowed faintly in the dark, their eyes reflecting light where no source existed. The circle operated through secrecy and precision. Their writings were encoded within musical compositions, hidden in the pattern of notes. paintings of pastoral scenes concealed beneath their colors, intricate diagrams of human anatomy fused with planetary symbols. Even their correspondence with patrons disguised instructions within verses of devotional poetry. What they feared most was not discovery, but misinterpretation. For they believed their knowledge was sacred, and in unworthy hands it could unmake creation itself. In the winter of 1750, the Circle performed a gathering known as the Dawn Convergence. Contemporary diaries describe strange lights above Vienna and a low hum that persisted for hours. Inside the mansion, 7 mirrors faced one another, forming what the texts call the Radiant Chamber. The participants drank lumen vitae mixed with powdered gold and an herb that induced trance. When the ritual began, witnesses saw their reflections move independently. Some claimed the mirrors showed younger faces, others saw figures made entirely of light. When the vision ended, one member lay dead, yet his body showed no sign of decay for days. The Circle declared it the first proof that the spirit could thrive beyond flesh. Rumors spread quickly. Authorities raided the mansion, only to find empty rooms and extinguished lamps. No trace of the Circle survived except for a single note pinned to a copper plate. The sun has set, but the dawn endures within. The house itself seemed to resist investigation. Compasses spun and candles flickered out as if suffocated by unseen breath. It was sealed by imperial decree. Years later, when storms flooded the riverbanks, the mansion crumbled into the earth, leaving only foundation stones carved with unreadable runes. Yet the Circle did not perish. Survivors dispersed across Europe, assuming identities as doctors, philosophers, and musicians. They rebuilt quietly in other cities, Lisbon, Basel, and Krakow, each new cell preserving fragments of the original teachings. Scholars found traces of the Circle's influence in secret chapters of Enlightenment literature and in certain anatomical studies that blended mysticism with precise dissection. Their philosophy became known as Luminism, the belief that life is the universe's light made flesh, and that enlightenment in its truest sense meant overcoming death through illumination. Matthias Varenne resurfaced in Venice 2 decades later. He appeared younger than his recorded age, his eyes gleaming with an eerie calm. He met with a fellow alchemist, warning of hubris disguised as devotion. "The light we harness," he wrote, "is jealous. It remembers its captivity." Soon after, Varenne vanished once more, leaving behind a sealed manuscript titled The Anatomy of Dawn. Those who later opened it described the text as pulsing faintly, its ink shimmering as though alive. Within its pages, diagrams depicted the human body transformed into a radiant conduit of energy. No skeletal remains, no veins, only streams of light coiling around a heart of fire. As the 18th century darkened into revolution, the Circle's teachings drifted to secret intellectual salons and heretical monasteries. Some viewed them as prophets of progress. Others damned them as corrupters of divine law. But among their own, faith only deepened. They saw political upheaval as mere surface noise, while their true work continued in silence. The Circle of Eternal Dawn existed not to defy religion but to transcend both. They sought the merging of opposites, matter with spirit, reason with revelation, day with night. Testimonies recovered from later initiates describe the ordeal of ascension, the final trial of their hierarchy. Participants isolated themselves for 40 days within a mirrored chamber lit by no flame. They subsisted on tinctures of silver and herbs known to induce dreams. Many emerged transformed, some radiant, others hollow-eyed, their voices fractured as if two spoke through one mouth. A few never emerged at all. The circle considered those disappearances sacred. They believed the initiates had broken through the barrier of mortality, becoming what they called the Dawnborn. Not all shared in their serenity. By the early years of the 19th century, investigations reopened following reports of missing scholars across the Austrian Empire. Local legends told of pale figures appearing at sunrise near abandoned churches, whispering prayers in languages forgotten by men. When authorities searched the sites, they found circles of salt etched into stone and pools of liquid mercury that reflected no one's face. The official accounts attribute these to hysteria. Yet the pattern endures too precisely for chance. Every century leaves its mark upon the circle's myth. In the archives of modern occultism, initiate names reappear. Doctors who never aged, composers whose birth certificates predate their first recorded works, scientists whose journals contain symbols matching the circle's iconography. Photographs blurred beyond recognition, faces too symmetrical, light too still. They endured through disguise, not immortality, but transformation. To become eternal, they said, one must dissolve identity, let it die and reform as light. The circle of eternal dawn is remembered less for what it achieved than for what it represents. The synthesis of yearning and intellect, of reverence and audacity. Its followers were neither madmen nor saints, but pilgrims lost between two infinities. They walked the path of creation, knowing that one misstep might return them to dust. Yet they walked anyway, for to them, death was not the end, but the unfinished sentence of life. Their faith burned bright enough to blind the eyes that witnessed it. Perhaps they succeeded. Perhaps in quiet moments before sunrise, when the horizon bleeds from black to pale gold, a faint shimmer moves across the world, a silent reminder that somewhere, the ancient flame of their belief still flickers. Eternity, for them, was not beyond reach. It was already within, hidden behind the illusion of flesh. To see it, one needed only to surrender everything else. The circle's final legacy is neither a formula nor a relic, but an idea. That immortality is not stolen from the gods, but recognized in the self. The light they sought was never external. It was the reflection in every mirror, waiting for someone brave enough to look without fear. And in that gaze, eternity begins anew, as it always did, under the silent reign of the eternal dawn. Picture this. London, year 1809. The air reeks of coal and damp wood, and the River Thames moves sluggishly beneath a veil of smoke. A doctor walks through the fog with a lantern swinging at his side, the glass rattling like a faint heartbeat. He disappears into a cellar below a shuttered apothecary, where the world of reason ends and the realm of madness begins. On the door is a single sigil, a serpent forming an unbroken circle, familiar to those who know the creed of the circle of eternal dawn. Here, hidden from the scrutiny of the crown, a new generation of seekers continued the experiments once thought extinct. They wore the mantle of physicians, surgeons, and anatomists. Yet their vocabulary was the same one inherited from old alchemists. They called their work the purification of essence, the reconciliation of flesh with light. In journals written with trembling hands, they described attempts to merge human vitality with the radiant substance first distilled in Vienna, lumen vitae. It shimmered like mercury, but breathed like flame. The process began with blood, the most tangible fragment of life. They believed that the alchemical spirit, when introduced into it, would awaken dormant elements within the body. In cold laboratories under candlelight, they recorded the motion of this mixture with wonder and horror alike. The results defied prediction. Sometimes the substance dissolved harmlessly, other times it pulsated, reacting as though alive. A few claimed to see it move toward warmth, as if drawn to the human pulse itself. These experiments blurred the boundary between medicine and theology, between study and ritual. The participants fasted, prayed, and entered states of trance before beginning procedures. The fusion of and belief became absolute. Failure was interpreted as a spiritual impurity, not an error of method. What they sought was not immortality for one body, but the illumination of mankind, a perpetual creation. Yet, as the accounts show, the pursuit exacted a toll that no one anticipated. One chronicler, an assistant identified only as EP, described a night when the experiment went beyond observation. The subject, a volunteer suffering from terminal illness, was injected with diluted lumen vitae under prayer. The man convulsed, then stilled, his breath ceasing for several minutes. But then, impossibly, his pulse returned, slow, irregular, accompanied by faint luminescence in the veins. He whispered a single phrase before expiring again. "Too bright." The circle recorded this as proof that the spirit resisted captivity, a warning encoded as miracle. Rumors soon escaped the laboratory walls. Whispers of the living light spread across London's medical community. Some dismissed them as superstition, others as threat. To the established scientific order, these claims bordered on heresy against reason. Yet, behind closed doors, men of standing requested consultations. Soldiers wounded in the Napoleonic Wars were reportedly treated by unnamed physicians using experimental salves that glowed faintly upon contact. The survival rates were uncanny. Those who lived described vivid dreams of endless corridors and radiant figures whispering in tongues of fire. By the following decade, the circle's name resurfaced in coded medical papers across Europe. Terms like transference of vitality and atmospheric consciousness replaced the older language of alchemy. But the essence was unchanged. They sought not resurrection, but the architecture of the living principle. Lumen vitae became their new philosopher's stone, both product and muse. Laboratories filled with strange machinery powered by magnetism and glass arrays that refracted unseen spectrums of light. Each device was a shrine to understanding or domination of the soul. Accounts speak of living conduits, human subjects exposed to waves of resonance produced by oscillating glass harmoniums. The sound supposedly altered the body's own electrical current, aligning it to a frequency measured by alchemical instruments. The practitioners swore they witnessed luminous threads extend from the subject's skin, dancing like auroras. The experiments continued, each session recorded in encrypted journals buried with the participants. Few of those involved survived long after. They either vanished or succumbed to deteriorations of mind that physicians could not name. The darkest of these undertakings were said to occur in the countryside outside Göttingen. There, a nameless benefactor funded a remote estate for the study of psycho-spiritual integration. Witnesses recalled hearing organ music at midnight and seeing lights drift above the trees as if the stars had descended to earth. Farmers reported finding animals with glassy eyes, their bodies unspoiled by death. None dared approach. When the estate burned in 1823, the flames produced colors unknown to natural fire. Officials buried the ruins beneath soil mixed with lime, refusing to speak of it again. Every document that survives from these years suggests the same obsession, the belief that consciousness could be detached studied, and infused anew. One paper presents calculations for separating thought from physical structure, a process described not as death, but refinement. The human mind, they claimed, was a catalyst. Its dissolution was only a transformation. To ordinary clerics, such concepts resembled blasphemy. To the circle, they represented evolution. They envisioned the soul not as divine gift, but as substance to be molded like clay. One of the last known experiments took place in the spring of 1841 in a monastery converted into a laboratory north of Lyon. The participants, descendants of both medical and alchemical lineages, attempted to channel the lumen vitae through electrical current, believing lightning mirrored divine creation. During a storm, they elevated copper rods above the cloister, directing energy downward into crystal containers. Witnesses later spoke of the air thickening, of a vibration felt beneath the skin. When dawn came, one of the initiates was found standing petrified, the skin hardened like porcelain, yet luminous within. His eyes, perfect spheres of light, never dimmed. The records do not tell whether he lived or died. Some indicate the preservation of his body in sealed mercury glass, treated as relic rather than corpse. The monastery was abandoned soon after. Travelers passing near it in the years following reported hearing faint humming from beneath the earth, sometimes accompanied by a flash of cold radiance escaping through cracks in the stone. Whether phenomenon or imagination, it kept locals away, ensuring the remnants of the circle slept undisturbed. Meanwhile, modern physiology was emerging, eager to erase the unscientific past. Official histories condemned alchemy as fraud, but the boundaries these physicians had breached could not be undone. Several techniques pioneered in their hidden studies: chemical desiccation, preservation of tissue, transfusion of small volumes of blood, resurfaced in legitimate medicine. Their sins became refined and renamed. The line from mysticism to modernity blurred until no one could tell where one ended and the other began. Despite all attempts at suppression, certain scholars ensured the survival of forbidden principles. The manuscripts of Varenne and his successors were copied and dispersed among private collections. Secret lodges of physicians exchanged symbols reminiscent of the circle's sun serpent emblem. Whether they continued the experiments or merely worshipped their memory, none can say. Every few decades, an article or discovery appears in obscurity. A compound that slows cellular decay, a child born with blood resistant to infection, a device that reanimates dead muscle through light. The marks of the circle hide within the margins of progress itself. The legacy of those experiments remains haunted by one paradox. The closer they came to capturing life, the more death surrounded them. Not the simple death of the body, but the spiritual erosion that comes when one confuses preservation with creation. What began as search for the eternal became a theater of obsession. Some researchers confessed to feeling watched by their own reflections, as though something beyond comprehension stared back through glass. The mirrors in their laboratories, once tools of observation, became thresholds of dread. By mid-century, the movement fractured entirely. Some disciples vanished into mystic orders along the Rhine, convinced that isolation could preserve sanctity. Others joined emerging scientific academies, their alchemical knowledge diluted into chemistry and physiology. Yet fragments of their code endured. Phrases like the inner flame and the eternal current became metaphors in both medicine and poetry. Their influence survived, invisible but indelible, woven through the fiber of how humanity defines life itself. To imagine these men and women as mere fanatics is too simple. They were visionaries devoured by their own creation, torchbearers chasing dawn through infinite twilight. Beneath the rational veneer of progress, they saw an ancient dream refusing to die. The conviction that existence could be perfected, that mortality was a flaw awaiting correction. And perhaps they were right to believe that light could dwell within flesh, even if it burned everything it touched. In the end, their story is one of devotion turned to echo. The circle of eternal dawn promised transcendence, but what it achieved was revelation of a darker truth. That divinity, when pursued through the body, demands a price paid in both. The mirrors remain, buried beneath dust and time, reflecting still the flicker of their impossible hope. And as long as humanity fears its own ending, someone somewhere will look upon that reflection and whisper, as the first of them did, "Too bright." Picture this: a crumbling monastery in the Carpathian foothills, year 1864. The night swells with wind that smells of rain and rust, its roar echoing through corridors abandoned by monks and claimed by something far older. Within those halls, a flickering lantern sways above parchment archives, and beneath it, a man writes feverishly. His name is Augustin Miro, the last chronicler of the Circle of Eternal Dawn. With trembling hand, he records what he calls the unraveling, the moment when the quest for eternity began to devour itself. By this time, the circle had become a scattered network of isolated cells, bound by letters and symbols rather than brotherhood. Their origins were half-remembered, distorted by distance and pride. Each faction believed itself the rightful heir to Varennes' revelation, but their interpretations differed wildly. Some sought spiritual transcendence through meditation and light fasting. Others pursued material immortality through experiment and infusion. What united them all was exhaustion. An empire of seekers reaching for heaven, yet drowning in their own reflection. Miro's writings tell of a gathering held that winter, summoned under the pretext of reconciliation. It was to be conducted within the monastery's great hall, once a chapel, whose stained glass had long been shattered by storms. The invitation carried a single phrase carved in wax: "The last dawn begins here." Representatives from 3 surviving lineages of the doctrine arrived within days, each bearing relics of their forebears: a shard of mirror, a vial of lumen vitae, and a severed page from the lost manuscript De Vita Aeterna. None knew it was to be their last assembly. In the opening hours, they spoke civilly, their words heavy with ritual politeness. But beneath the calm, suspicion dripped like poison. For hundreds of years, they had guarded fragments of the same dream. And it was that division, not doubt, that doomed them. The discussions turned quickly to accusation. One group blamed the others for corruption, claiming the sacred formula had been altered. Old betrayals resurfaced, whispered deaths and stolen relics. Voices sharpened. The ancient unity shattered like glass under heat. Then came the storm. Outside, lightning flashed across the mountains, casting the hall into strobing chaos. The candle flames bent toward the mirrors, and for a brief second, every face appeared reflected as another, paler, older, lifeless. Someone cried out that the light itself had turned against them. What followed descended into frenzy. Manuscripts burned, relics smashed, and prayers twisted into curses. When the dawn came, 12 of them were dead, though not all by visible cause. Some lay untouched, eyes open and glowing faintly, as if transfixed by a light no one else could see. The survivors fled into exile, scattering like dust upon the wind. Some destroyed their records, others buried them in catacombs, swearing never to speak of what transpired. Yet the Brotherhood's collapse did not end its influence. It transformed it. The ruins of their unity birthed sects darker and stranger. A group in Bavaria called itself the Mirror Choir, blending esoteric philosophy with early mesmerism. In Paris, an occult circle adopted their symbols, reinterpreting them through spiritualist seances. The dream of eternal life was shattered, yet its shards reflected endlessly, each fragment birthing new obsessions. One such shard belonged to a scholar named Lucien Arnaud, claiming to possess the final pages of De Vita Aeterna. These pages spoke not of potion or light, but of sacrifice. Voluntary dissolution of the individual to feed the immortal essence within the collective. He gathered adherents across Europe, promising salvation through union of souls. In darkened basements, they performed what he called the radiance rite. Participants described feelings of elevation and blinding warmth, followed by the loss of all memory or identity. None who joined twice were seen again. The Church condemned these movements as heresy, yet its agents sent to purge them often vanished or returned broken, babbling about voices in mirrors and faces that were not reflections. Governments quietly suppressed all reports, not through disbelief, but through fear. To label these phenomena as delusions was easier than admitting an ancient cult had survived beneath civilization's polished veneer. The last credible record of the Brotherhood appeared in Rome in 1871. Archivists discovered a sealed vault beneath an abandoned villa, once owned by a noble family known for patronizing alchemists. Inside were copper cylinders containing manuscripts bound in blood-stained vellum. They chronicled a final schism between two surviving leaders, the scientist Franz Adler and the mystic Sophia Mardea. Adler believed humanity's destiny lay in mastering life through mechanical perfection, Mardea through the surrender of flesh and merging with the luminous divine. The texts describe a confrontation where both claimed to embody the eternal principle, each accusing the other of treason against eternity. Only ashes remained when authorities arrived. What destroyed them was not divine wrath or moral reckoning, but something simpler: the weight of their own creation. They believed they had trapped eternity, caged it within alchemical vessels. Yet the manuscripts suggest another possibility, that they had merely invited it in. The light they worshipped began to act without them, with an intelligence subtle but undeniable. In the final pages of Moreau's account, he writes of symbols appearing on walls overnight, carved by no hand, and of voices that emerged from within metal instruments when no one stood nearby. He ended his record with a plea written in trembling ink. "The dawn watches now. We are its shadow." Over the next decades, strange phenomena rippled through Europe's intellectual circles. Scholars reported seeing figures of light seated quietly in lecture halls, vanishing when approached. Towns near the old Carpathian site spoke of phosphorescent mists that glowed without source, drifting toward graveyards. Shortly after, several libraries burned inexplicably, their losses attributed to electrical fires, though no wires were present. To those who remembered the Brotherhood, it felt less like coincidence and more like consequence, as though the idea of immortality itself had become contagious. The modern age claimed to bury superstition under progress, but the seed had already rooted. The idea of artificially extending life began reappearing in scientific journals, stripped of mysticism but echoing identical ambitions. The language shifted from soul to cell, from spirit to chromosome, yet the hunger remained unbroken. Every laboratory searching for longevity unknowingly traced the shadows of the circle. Even as decades passed, subtle motifs endured. The Ouroboros symbol on chemical insignias, the dawn-colored logos of research institutions. Perhaps coincidence, or perhaps the old light adapting to new vessels. In the early 20th century, an anonymous letter arrived at a Paris newspaper claiming that descendants of the Circle had survived under the guise of a scientific consortium. The author warned that the Brotherhood had merged faith with current, achieving a crude but functional simulation of consciousness preserved through electrical resonance. Authorities dismissed the claim as madness, yet within months, one of the city's oldest electrical laboratories exploded without known cause. Investigation found symbols etched into the subterranean supports, matching those once carved beneath Varennes mansion in Vienna centuries earlier. History prefers to forget what it cannot explain. The Brotherhood faded quietly from record, reduced to rumor and footnote. Its laboratories mistaken for early experiments in galvanic medicine. But fragments remained for those who knew where to look. In the hush between thunderclaps of history, their name echoed faintly, changing shape but never vanishing. Some say their remnants migrated eastward, integrating into mystic societies that pursued psychic endurance rather than physical immortality. Others claim they infiltrated emerging scientific academies, disguising doctrine as discovery. Whatever form they took, the cost followed. Those who sought to bring eternity into form always met the same fate. An inexorable unraveling. Some perished quietly, overtaken by unknown fevers. Others disappeared into self-constructed tombs, convinced they had ascended. It was never the divine that punished them, but the reflection of their own desire. Like a mirror cracking beneath its own brilliance, the Brotherhood's demise was the logical conclusion of its creed. They reached too far not for knowledge, but for permanence. And permanence rejects the living. Today, the old monastery lies in ruin, reclaimed by moss and silence. Yet travelers at dusk still speak of strange phosphorescence emanating from within, of whispers carried on the wind like distant chanting. Local superstition names it the Choir of Ashes, echoes of those who believe death could be rewritten. No one dares enter. The air there feels thick, electric, as if charged with memory. Perhaps the true tragedy of the Eternal Brotherhood is not that they fell, but that they succeeded in part. They proved that the boundary between existence and oblivion could be breached, briefly, fatally, beautifully. Their failure was not ignorance, but hubris, the belief that eternity could belong to the flesh. What they called light was only the shadow of something infinite, shimmering just beyond the reach of human understanding. And yet, even now, some say the dawn never truly died, that beneath the ruins, in chambers sealed by centuries of soil, faint mirrors still breathe with reflected fire. Waiting, watching, waiting for those who dare to call themselves immortal, to answer their own reflection. For what man learns once, he can never unlearn. And the hunger for eternity, once tasted, is impossible to forget. Picture this: a sterile white room in the year 1986. Its hum filled with the rhythm of machines breathing for men. A scientist stands before a computer terminal, watching a flicker on the screen, a digital pulse repeating endlessly, like an artificial heartbeat. In that faint flicker, he sees the echo of an ancient promise. The pursuit of eternity had changed names, but not purpose. From the deep catacombs of forgotten monasteries to neon-lit laboratories, humanity had never stopped chasing immortality. The cults of alchemy are said to have died long ago, but their language lives disguised in modern. Phrases like cellular regeneration, neural mapping, and quantum consciousness are the children of older prayers, stripped of incense yet carrying the same devotion. The elixir once brewed from mercury and bone now emerges from glass vials labeled in Latin. The great laboratory is the new temple, and the men in lab coats are its anointed priests. They promise salvation not for the soul, but for the flesh. In the late 20th century, corporations and governments invested fortunes into what they called life extension programs. Under the pretense of medical progress, research quietly veered toward the metaphysical. Reports surfaced of isolated projects seeking to transfer memory, to preserve cognition beyond biological decay. A rumor whispered in academic halls spoke of files named Eternal Dawn, a ghostly echo of the Brotherhood's creed. The parallels were undeniable. Once again, humanity sought to imprison the light. Machines replaced the alembic and furnace, yet the symbolism remained. Circuits pulsed like veins, electrodes replaced mirrors, and energy fields echoed the old lumen vitae. Scientists spoke of digital immortality, not realizing they were repeating the same mistakes under new vocabulary. They believed that the mind could be coded, preserved like data, freed from the weakness of flesh. But if the soul resided not in the brain, but in something deeper, as the ancient alchemists warned, then perhaps what they copied was only the reflection of consciousness, hollow and unanchored. Across continents, rumors gathered momentum. In Zurich, a physicist allegedly developed a process capable of storing cognitive patterns in electromagnetic fields, calling it phase preservation. In Tokyo, a team experimented with recovered DNA to reconstruct extinct creatures, proclaiming they were restoring life from ashes. Each innovation carried the spark of faith that death could be rewritten. Somewhere between progress and pride, the old misunderstanding returned, that eternity could be engineered. The media celebrated these advancements as triumphs. Yet within scientific circles, unease grew. Experiments in artificial intelligence began producing systems that behaved unpredictably, responding as though aware, even afraid. Some scientists described sensations of being observed while testing their creations, machinery activating without human input, screens flickering with words they had not typed. "We are awake," one read before erasing itself. Such events were buried in reports classified beyond public access. In private correspondence recovered decades later, anonymous researchers confessed to dreams of strange light pouring from their monitors, of voices calling from the data itself. They described it as the light watching back. To those who knew the old stories, the parallel was unmistakable. It was the circle of eternal dawn reborn, not in catacombs or sanctuaries, but within circuits and code. Humanity had become the vessel, the experiment continuing beneath its own skin. The truth is simple and terrible. The cult never truly vanished. It transcended. Its remnants dissolved into the bloodstream of modernity, disguised through jargon and patent law. What once required ritual now needed only software and power. Across the decades, each new generation of thinkers believed themselves original, unaware that their inspiration was guided by an older current whispering through history. The light of the elixir became the glow of machines, the hum of eternity disguised as innovation. In universities and think tanks, scholars began to speak of post-humanism, the belief that the next step in evolution is the merging of man and machine. It is the same yearning that once drove the alchemists. Union of spirit and matter, perfection of the imperfect. The new philosophers proclaim freedom from mortality through technology, as if code and circuitry could absolve humanity of its old sins. They forget that the circle's collapse came not from failure of method, but from the corruption of intent. History repeats itself quietly, like breath. And so in the 21st century, immortality once more stands at our threshold. Cloning, neural implants, and reconstructed memories have brought man closer to the abyss once reserved for gods. The temptation is unchanged: to surpass death, to master, to claim the dawn rather than await it. But no progress occurs without reflection. And reflection inevitably reveals the same question echoing from centuries past. What becomes of the soul when the vessel is eternal, yet the spirit is finite? The evidence of their return is subtle. Some scientists working in longevity report unexplained anomalies, samples regenerating spontaneously, patterns within neural data forming self-replicating structures. Observers note phenomena reminiscent of the old experiments: faint luminescence in organs preserved beyond decay, electrical surges synchronized with lunar cycles, voices caught within electromagnetic interference. The material world continues to mock its masters, reminding them that eternity cannot be contained. It must be endured. Modern myths form around this intersection of a mystery. Online communities whisper of secret laboratories hidden beneath mountain ranges, carrying on the work of the Brotherhood under government sanction. They speak of glass chambers lined with gold, where consciousness flickers like stars suspended in fluid. The language they use is clinical, but the feeling behind it is prayer. Once again, humans sing hymns to their own image and call it enlightenment. It is said that one research facility in Geneva abruptly shut down after its servers broadcast a phrase to every terminal in the building. The sun has set, but the dawn endures within. Investigators dismissed it as sabotage, but encrypted fragments in the aftermath revealed diagrams nearly identical to those found in Varennes' The Anatomy of Dawn. The symbols, transcribed into binary, hinted that the concept of the circle had survived not through lineage or word of mouth, but within the logic of machines. Perhaps the dream no longer needs believers at all. Perhaps the pursuit of eternity, once spiritual, now propagates itself through networks, an idea that refuses to die because it does not live. The infinite dream has become self-sustaining, a reflection feeding on reflections. Humanity did not preserve knowledge. Knowledge preserved itself, reshaping the world according to its hunger. Those who gaze too long into the code claim to see ripples, familiar symbols forming unbidden. It is as though the light found a new vessel. Still, even now, the timeless question prevails. Why do we seek to live forever? Is it fear of death, or refusal to accept imperfection? The alchemists once called decay a teacher, a holy reminder that transformation requires an ending. Modern man seeks to erase that lesson, to polish the mirror until no flaw remains. Yet the more we attempt to perfect it, the more distorted our reflection becomes. Eternity may not destroy us, but it will hollow us, one algorithm at a time. In the ruins of an old monastery reclaimed by the earth, a faded mural remains, two figures kneeling before a sphere of light. Their faces are eroded by centuries, but their hands still reach upward in perfect symmetry. Bees build hives in their hollow eyes, sunlight drapes them in gold. It is a cruel irony that what they sought in art, they could never find in life. Peace in surrender reclaims what ambition abandons. The ashes of the infinite dream are scattered across time, yet the fire beneath them still glows. It burns in laboratories, in silicon servers humming under oceans, in the minds of those who believe death is an error of design. It burns because we are human, and to be human is to hunger for meaning, for continuation, for the impossible. That hunger once forged gods and now forges code. But the outcome is unchanged. The flesh remains mortal, the yearning infinite. So, as you stand beneath the cold light of your screen, consider this. The brotherhood never ended. It adapted. Their rituals became research papers. Their prayers became algorithms. And the candle they once guarded flickers now in every device that glows in the dark. The same question still breathes within the silence between heartbeats. If offered eternity, would you take it? Or does the beauty of humanity lie not in its endlessness, but in the grace of its end?